Superstition is much older than recorded history, and we now stand on the threshold of the 21st century. Yet just in proportion as humanity has passed over this enormous space of time, hand in hand with progress, superstition has followed it like its shadow. That shadow has not yet passed away. Superstition is not easily defined. To say that it is a disposition to believe more than is warranted by reason leaves us just as helpless as ever. For where reason is impotent, we have nothing tangible left to fall back upon. There is absolutely no support on which to rest the lever. Religion and philosophy, which at first fostered superstition, long ago turned against it. All forces with everything and all they possessed. Not even science may hope to overthrow what can only be reached through the inner consciousness of man. Because science can have little to do with the spiritual side of man, that intelligible something that eludes its grasp. If all these combined forces of civilization have so far signally failed to eradicate superstition, so much the worse for civilization. And erudite scholars have failed to interpret modern superstition or to aid even comparative mythology. Barbarians even believe in some sort of future state. And in this principle of superstition, principles thereof good and evil, and the rewards and punishments, there needs no argument then to account for the insatiable longing to pry into the futurity and to discover hidden mystery. The same idea unsettled the minds of former generations, nor can it truthfully said to have disappeared before the vaunted wisdom of this utilitarian age. Like all forbidden fruit, this may be said, and the anxiety of the weak-minded are not to be overcome any. I'm Winter Lake at winterlake.com, streaming QUE4.org. It's nice to be with you tonight, this beautiful Chicago night, on Black Friday, which is Consumer Slave Day, which is fine. People need to buy things and have ambition to do things. I sit either side of the fence on the topic of Black Friday. It's kind of interesting because in ancient medieval times, when they had Black Friday, that is when they brought out all of the corpses. So typically, they would wait till Friday, the end of the week, as the pestilence ravaged the countrysides throughout Europe during that time. I don't even think America was discovered then yet. But they would bring out the corpse on Friday, hence Black Friday. And now it's a day that has been boondoggled into the purchasing and to bring our civilization into the black as opposed to the red. And even though these economical things are kind of entertaining, there is a darkness to it, a symbolism. Freya is Friday's symbolic name, Freya, the goddess of the hunt. So in that combination, we have the great huntress, Freya of the Nordic gods, being Friday, and Black Friday being the day that the corpses of Black Plague were brought out. Today's show is going to be very interesting. I've been doing some research on the activities of unidentified flying objects in this region and kind of getting to the bottom of some new discovery. Was looking at the Lake Michigan and Lake Erie and all these other lakes that are surrounding the Chicago region of this thing called the, again, Black Triangle, Devil's Triangle, or the Northern Lake Triangle, that runs off the Anacondic Line, which is a direct parallel with the Bermuda Triangle. So there's some kind of odd, what is known as a ley line, parallel mathematical calculation between these two lakes, or obviously that being the ocean, but these two parallel triangles within our dimension and reality. And a lot of different crafts have been sighted, or different odd alien experiences have occurred around this region, and that being the Chicago area and so on throughout the entirety of the Great Lakes all the way up into Toronto. And even going into some things that had occurred in Canada, which are still perplexing a lot of different individuals in regards to some kind of alien enclave or something being near islands. And we will be discussing that. Also today, we have a ghost investigator team. I just like to use that term. They're a paranormal group, and they are out right now as we are conversing live, 5 to 7 here on the Pentacle-Hours. They are right now inside a renowned haunted axe murder location where several people were killed, leaving a trace of their personality as a ghost within this structure. And hopefully they will call in and let us be informed on what is occurring live, maybe some ghost box feedback or information. It's not fiction. They're really there. It is not staged. They do this all the time. We just now have the opportunity with our timing to be on the air live while they are on in their house live conducting this ghost experiment. And also, I am going to be interpreting a few dreams that need to be looked at again. I received an email from someone who said I did not interpret their dream, and I did. I did interpret your dream, but I'm going to interpret it again because I want to make it clear that sometimes in this chaos that's been going on around the studio, possibly odd things have been deleted or things have gone amiss or things have faded out. But I am perplexed as to why that first show or some show that was done containing your dream has been amiss, and so I'm going to read it now. I dreamt I was walking next to a street to my mother's house. This is the city I grew up. As I was walking, I suddenly noticed two small children, two twin girls, maybe possibly age 6. They were riding their bicycles and looking at me. Cute dresses, long brown hair. They were strange, and their eyes were like blind people. When they were there, their eyes were open, light bluish green, and they were hypnotizing. But the girls were blind, obviously, as they were driving their bikes. They were not blind. For some reason, I didn't like them, and I made a stupid face at them. They reacted immediately and made, and I'm reading this, immediately and made them back, and they were sticking their tongues and making some kind of gesture. And they were walking, and they also seemed to come up and touch this person's arm. So as they touched the person's arm, there was a power exchange. Some kind of energy, some kind of intuition was given off there. And it was also appears to have been dreamt in pieces intermittently throughout the night. So as it, this person would awake, it would begin to recur. Now, in an interpretation, which I did interpret this before, and I'm deadly serious about finding out what happened to the original recording, we have to look at the symbology of what is going on with the cataracts with the children, this blindness. Is the person, feeling that they have something that they are holding back? I think so. And the interpretation of it, if you are seeing anything blind, there is something being held back from you. It is not, a full vision thing. It'd be easy to say that seeing 2 children, or possibly in your dream that you would have 2 children, that's very easy to say. Or there's 2 separate situations within your life that you need to handle and that you're not addressing. So you're going blind. You're not really wanting to face that self-deception, and there might be 2 separate things that you need to handle. And on the flip side, you possibly could end up in your lifetime having 2 children. And in looking at some of this issue with the driving of the bikes and mechanisms of steel, that has everything to do with alchemistry. It has everything to do with your timing and how you're feeling during that moment. And the bikes are symbolic of action and motion. So you can either stay where you are and kind of continue on this slow pace, or you can step it up and make changes that needs to be made. Now, what's really interesting about this dream was this power exchange. That means that there will be something that will occur that will galvanize you to make this necessary change within your life that you need to make. There is something that is holding you back. So in looking at this dream, it's then interpreted, that's my interpretation. It can go a lot of different ways, but that's how I'm kind of looking at it. And this is Winter Lake, and we are now joined by my friend here, the illustrious man with no face, who is remaining anonymous for our UFO conversation. I'm just kidding you.
It's all right.
But, you know,
I'm afraid of no man.
You know, but I mean, the black ops government. But yeah, you said you're not really concerned about that. So
I wrote the play,
I guess
the People's Republic of Edward Snowden, that went after him. So they're gonna come for me. They're gonna come for me.
The gentleman that's joined me, his name is Turk. He has worked in the airline industry for over 11 years, and there was an incident that occurred in O'Hare Field, which is the airport in and around Chicago. And, you know, there was a UFO that was sighted there that actually made the papers. A UFO could be anything. It could be terrestrial. It could be anything. It could be an actual alien, unidentified flying object. This symbol simply means that there was something that occurred that we can't explain. It's an aircraft that we've never seen before. It's something out of the ordinary. Now, when Turk, that is the gentleman who is here, mentioned this to me, I went on a little bit of an escapade and did some research and tried to track some things down. And in trying to track some things down, I hit a few walls. And that's rare because I kind of know pretty much everything about UFOs you'd want to know, but this seems to have a real blackout quality to it. There were individuals that were silenced, that were told, even though you were out on the tarmac that day, you didn't see anything and it's not worth your job. And, you know, like people were kind of put over a barrel. And I was kind of surprised to discover that. But I wanted to speak with Turk from his impression because he was a man that was close or near about the event.
Yes.
And he knew people who were right on the event and who had worked right there. And there is a difference between the military airfield that is in the O'Hare area than the regular, what I would call residential. And Turk worked in the residential. Mm-hmm. So, Turk, what do you think occurred at the O'Hare field that day?
Well, I should go back and say a little bit that you know, a lot of the people that I worked with were ex-military. And there's kind of a military regimen to working O'Hare, especially for a major airline like I did. This was United Airlines, and we, you know, when I was working for them, we did a lot of traffic. You know, that O'Hare was, and if you look at it practically, if you exclude the little tiny feeder jets, for major aircraft, it is still the busiest airport in the world.
Yes, it is. It's very busy.
And you know, you work a gate, or you work with a team. You're out there. You're working those planes day in and day out. But you're working 6, 7, 8, 9 planes where you're unloading, loading, refueling, servicing completely. So it's very much, you know, like a military style.
And Turk, you know, you guys were outside around the aircraft.
Yes.
So you were doing all of these various things and also spraying and doing all these technical things outside. That's the major thing to make it clear that you're not inside viewing this.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's very hands-on. And the other aspect of this, and this is true for all of the people, many of the people that were directly involved in this incident, is that you work with people very intimately. Sometimes you see them hurt. You work through very difficult circumstances, you know, really stringent time frames, a dangerous environment.
It is dangerous.
It's very dangerous out there.
Because there's just so much going on. There's chaos with the vehicles.
Mm-hmm. I used to train people to assume that everything and everyone out there is trying to kill you, and that you need to be watching 365 degrees because things will sneak up on you. I was almost run down in the middle of a really deep fog traveling between two terminals, and literally a DC-10, a large DC-10, came out of nowhere in the fog and was right on top of me, and I barely cleared the landing gear, and then swung it out, ahead of the aircraft, and just managed to angle my way away from the engine. They come at you. Things can come at you very fast and in a very deadly like manner. So that's sort of the pretext for what happened here, and this happened at a gate. It was publicized a lot, but then the investigations really dropped off a cliff because people were shut down.
Let me interject one moment. In talking about weather conditions that you just mentioned.
Yep.
You mentioned that when you were out on the tarmac, you had that experience with that large air. The DC-10 is the capacity that you're dealing with.
Yes.
So we're getting that kind of out of the way. And fog was intense. What was the weather like during that day? It was a clear day, right?
With the DC-10 or the day of the UFO?
The day of the UFO.
It was a low ceiling, and people out at the airport get very, very good at judging and understanding and predicting the weather, and being ready for it. You have to be. It's such a large component of what people do out at the airport. You have to know something about the weather. By experience, by what have you, education, right. You have to know about the weather. So you begin to differentiate things, and a lot of these guys will come. They'll work in the tower, which is a very highly skilled area of the airport and job at the airport to work at. They'll come back and work on the field. So you have all of these cross-trained people. As I said, you have military people
and in rotation
out there for years. Yes.
So they would know the weather. And they would, you'd know the dangers.
You'd know the dangers. The other thing that you would know is before I started working at the airport, I had a stronger belief in UFOs. After I had worked at the airport for the better part of a dozen years, I began to have less. I became more skeptical because I had seen aircraft from every angle, in every sort of weather, in every kind of lighting. And you start thinking about all of those reports of UFOs and parceling them away and saying, well, yeah, now I know what this was, and now I know what this was. This was something entirely different.
The event you're speaking of. Mm-hmm. Now, are you familiar with this Brocken specter that occurs out at the airport at all?
What was that again?
It's called a Brocken specter.
I'm not familiar with that.
There was something in the development of O'Hare in these accidents that we were speaking of. There was some major aircraft that has gone down there. One being some kind of phantom, not a phantom, but I'm getting there. A large aircraft that broke up or exploded along in the airports in there.
At O'Hare?
At O'Hare.
The last one being, I was a witness to one fairly major accident. In which I think it was a little American Airlines DC-9 overshot the runway and spun to a stop basically in front of my car.
Wow, that's weird.
Yeah, and luckily no one was hurt.
But that's weird. It's by your car, and you were even near it at the time.
I was very near it at the time.
See, that's weird. So this, and I've been discussing synchronicity all week.
Yeah.
So in having it you near there, and also by your vehicle, that's just really odd.
Yeah.
And
then what you're thinking of, the last major accident that happened out there, the last fatal accident, or large, I believe it's still the deadliest accident in U.S. history for airplanes, was Flight 191 back in 1978, I think, if the date, within a year or two of there, that killed 328 people.
Correct. That is where I'm going. I was going to try to have one of the air traffic controllers on today that was there that day during that incident. Mm-hmm. That may materialize later. Obviously, during the holiday, couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. For some years after that, and even every now and then, and it's not readily discussed because there are psychological in name rings that have to go on with individuals that work around aircraft. You can't really talk crazy things. I mean, in crazy things, meaning that you can't really speak your mind. You have to kind of toe the line. And there has been from time to time an incident within radar called a Brock Inspector over this crash of 191, where they will see it come in out of nowhere and redouble itself every now on the radar. And I've had other things that I've read about or witnesses that have said they have seen the aircraft over and over again going in and crashing. And to me, it's kind of interesting, and I was wondering if you were out there at any time, if you had heard any or seen anything of the Brock Inspector.
No, I have heard, and 191 lost an engine, and then we're not to get too far afield here, but just to give people a background. 191 lost an engine, and the crew, not being able to see what had happened to their plane, overcompensated, over-rotated, and basically they did they turned over and did a nosedive into a field on the other side of Toohey Avenue, directly across. And I think that they're now beginning to build on there. But I've heard people say, and I knew people who were working and overseeing the temporary morgue for the bodies from 191 in the United hangar back when it happened. And I actually knew someone who had worked with the supervisor that had overseen the repair work on that engine prior to the accident, who subsequently committed suicide. So there are stories about all of those people out at the airport that you hear regularly, that the field is haunted, that sometimes in the terminal you see people queuing up for their aircraft when there's no plane there, and then in the middle of the night or what have you, or on that day, and then when the person comes back, there's nobody there. And so it's these odd little things.
United is notorious for having haunted planes. They have supposedly amongst their flight staff, they see and experience things all the time.
Yeah.
Do you rule a lot of that out, or is that just stress? I mean, I'm a skeptic as well. What causes a lot of people are in depression? They don't want to admit it, but being around an airport, is it just the environment? Is it the noise? What is causing the depression and anxiety around there? Could that be attributed
among workers or among passengers?
Just amongst workers in general. I mean, why does it have to be like that? Is that just the nature of the job?
It is an incredibly stressful job. It's an incredibly stressful job, both physically and mentally. I was hurt on the job. Most of the people that I worked with at some point were hurt on the job. I had major surgery over it. I can tell you, I've had friends that have had numerous knee and elbow and shoulder surgeries, neck surgeries, back surgeries.
Just injuries. Just that doesn't
injuries.
help anything.
And those are wear and tear injuries.
Oh yeah.
But I've seen some really severe accidents out there with people, broken legs and falling between aircraft and getting crushed and
you witnessed it.
Oh, I witnessed it. I've seen people drive behind airplanes and pick up a 3,000 pound tractor and a 2,000 pound carrier behind them and throw them 30 or 40 yards. There was a woman out there who was severely injured in an incident. That
huge liability.
Yes, yeah.
You watched it.
As I said, it's a really dangerous environment. So there is a lot of stress out there, and then just adhering to all the rules and regulations, which are primarily there for your safety. Same thing, but the timetable and dealing with the weather, and that's why I brought up the weather issue with regards to this UFO.
Yes,
because I am the eternal skeptic, and I did stop believing for a long time in UFOs, and because I did get really adept, like most of my coworkers, at gauging the weather, low ceilings, clouds, cloud types, lighting, what have you.
And that's where I'm kind of getting at. I'm like, okay, so we can discount the weather that day in particular, and we can kind of say that the workers that were on the tarmac that day were kind of hardened and know the difference between
I
stress
know these
event
people,
of
the
illusion.
mechanics and the ramp workers that were there. These are top-notch people, and they're not people prone to making stuff up. There's no need for that out there. And subsequently, some of the things that happened after that would really dissuade someone from wanting to come forward about something unusual.
So tell me exactly what happened.
This was at Gate C-19, and if people are familiar with the United Terminal out at O'Hare, there's two parts to it. There's the B side where you come in, you offload your bags, you go through security, and you go into those first gates. Then there's the remote side, and most people will take it via that underground passageway.
Yes, there
with the
is, and it's all
lights
illuminated. That lighting came in later, though, didn't it? That lighting, it was like...
Yeah, not too longer after they built the
I
terminal.
see.
But the terminal's I think that terminal now is about 25 years old. And so that other island out there is what they call the C terminal, the C side. So this happened at Gate C-19, which is between the two terminals. So
I'm also trying to triangulate this. You are familiar with the military area, right? Is there a military area still out there?
Not as strong as there used to be. They still use what used to be the and yeah, I could tell you some other things off the air that you'll
right.
find intriguing.
Right.
But there are some passageways underneath the airport, some fairly secret passageways that will get you to places that are still maintained by the military. And that you can't get to. And
why I'm talking about that is where is this military area according to C-19?
The old military area, and I knew this because I was in the Civil Air Patrol back in high school, and had visited there a number of times. And it was the old National Guard area, and it's right at Higgins and Higgins and Manheim Road. Which is now like a taxi stand and some other stuff. Right.
And this is in Illinois.
This is in Illinois, still on the airport grounds, and you can still see off of Higgins. You can still see where the gates were for the military. There is that area that's still maintained when they bring in Air Force One. That's where Air Force One parks or other dignitaries. I've seen a couple of the big Russian transports that park out there because for various reasons. Dignitaries will all park in that area, and it's still used by the military. I believe that part is privately owned now, but the military and other dignitaries have the lease of that.
So it's not really that close. The military field is not really near C-19, really.
No.
So it's like, how far away would you say it is?
As the crow flies, you can look directly across the taxiways and two runways, and it's maybe 3/4 of a mile. And 3/4 of a mile to a mile.
What year was this, just to specify? What year would you say the O'Hare incident?
The O'Hare incident, I believe that was 2008.
I received an email and asking this, just to clarify, was it a drone? Were they flying drones out of
what
there?
I had heard was that it was a circular disc, and a circular disc that was different in composition, and shape, and lighting. There was a different lighting on it than the cloud cover, so it was not part of the cloud cover.
It was not part of the cloud cover, and it was a circular disc. And how high off the ground was it?
I think they measured it at I think they estimated it at about 1,000 feet.
So this would be pre-drones. This was
pre-drones.
This was pre-drones.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a drone?
But it was circular. They said,
right.
The witnesses said it was circular.
Have you ever seen a drone flying out of that military field with all your experience?
Never.
Did you ever see any fighter jets fly out of there?
Yes.
So they were flying fighter jets.
Yes.
Were they F-16 fighter jets?
It was mostly for air shows that they would fly fighter jets. When I was working there, and I had been working there since about 1995, There were no permanent military aircraft.
So what you would say for the air show is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you would never see any kind of tactical launchings of aircraft. I'm just trying to get this out of the way. Have you ever seen black helicopters in that area?
No, I have seen CIA aircraft.
But so they're marked.
All
this
white.
is
No,
what I'm
no,
going.
they're not. They're all white. There's a couple, and then polar air cargo. I think.
Okay, now see, this is interesting. So, and I'm just getting this out of the way before we get more into the crux of the actual incident.
Yeah.
The CIA helicopters, you're saying they're white, is that right?
No, the aircraft, the transport aircraft,
and that is a
white,
jet.
No markings.
Is that a jet?
It's a jet. Yeah, it's
okay.
a 747.
And I'm specifically kind of going into helicopters. Did you see any white or black helicopters that were unmarked?
Never.
So you never saw any drone activity. You never saw any black and white helicopter activity at all near that gate.
Never.
So in backing up, we're at C-17, and this circular disc is hovering.
It was rare. To go back, it was very, very rare that you would ever see helicopters of any sort. First of all, flying over the airport, but certainly not hovering. Every once in a while, there would be something from the airport authority, like the DOA, that would cross. But generally, aircraft, there was a forbidden space for aircraft. So a flyover, you're gonna cut if you look at. People can look on Google Maps or Google Earth and see the configuration of the runways. They basically crisscross all the way around. So to do a flyover, you run the risk of, depending on the flight volume, you run the risk of running over landing and taking off aircrafts. And O'Hare right now, optimally on a good day, does about 120 takeoffs and landings.
That's a lot. So you can't get a helicopter in there. Per hour.
So that's like a 2-minute.
Right.
Yeah.
In the intervals, and I've seen the trail. I mean, you can have a trail of planes in the lineup on one parallel coming in for one runway.
Yes, yes.
And why I'm talking about helicopters is because the group that handles this unidentified unidentified flying activity, typically comes right in after an event in helicopters. They want to be right there.
Yeah.
That's why I was just curious if it would be easy to get one in there, and you're saying it'd be impossible, or really it's a forbidden zone for them.
Well, depending on who wanted to get something in, but there's really no place for them to land. But there's plenty of federal agents all over the airport, and that's what I ran into in trying to find out about this. I was just curious about it. And went to friends who I knew had stood underneath this object and were looking up at it and had reported it, along with pilots. So you had the flight team, the flight crew, you had mechanics, and you had the ramp guys. Incidentally, three separate groups of people who don't necessarily like each other. So they're not really going to be corroborating each other's testimony.
And that are on psychological analysis, because this is going back to what I said earlier. These aren't crackpots. They aren't people that just want to say something is something.
Right.
So when this object came down, a circular disc, hovering in probably a space of how high? 50 yards above the ground?
I think they said it was... I'm drawing a blank on the distances, only because I wasn't there to witness it. But I believe there was about 1,000 or 1,500 foot ceiling, and they said that it moved up and down through that ceiling of clouds and had hovered not far above the gate. Enough that they could clearly make out that it was separate from the clouds. From the cloud bank.
And in flying that low, I've received an email, and flying that low, you are not anticipated on radar, are you?
Oh, sure.
You are on radar?
Sure. Oh, sure, up there. Yeah. Either you're either being tracked on radar at that level, or you're being filmed. There are cameras everywhere. So
the incident possibly is filmed.
Quite possibly, yeah. quite possibly at every single gate out there has a video camera. Now, most of the gate cameras point in somewhat of a downward direction because they're sitting up on top of the
They're
terminal.
watching the
looking down.
people in safety and recognition.
But not all of them, and there are a number that are a distance off, and there are additional cameras that could conceivably have caught that. Yes.
And so this object that came down and hovered near C-17 and C-19, and in looking at it hovering at a certain distance, was it just still or was it moving?
Everything that I had heard from the reports was, and this is where it starts to get interesting, because I had heard that it was stationary, but then it moved up through the cloud bank and actually left a hole in the cloud bank before moving off, and before the clouds then moved in or moved off. What gets really interesting is when I went to people that I had known for decades, or for the better part of a decade at least, and worked with very closely. And we had some of those people we had words with. I mean, toe to toe, the kind of things in a high stress.
Well, you fight in those kind of environments.
In a high stress, environment, you're going to get into some heated, tough conversations with people. So these are people that we had learned that we could trust each other in very difficult situations. Not only that, but we had also learned that we were going to be honest with each other no matter what. So when I went in to inquire about this incident, just out of curiosity, to a man, each of these people said, "I can't talk about it. I can't talk about it. I was told not to talk about it." They were terrified, and each of them had been warned that if they talked about it, not only would there be repercussions for their job, but possibly for their families.
See, this is so standard with some of these events that are going on around actual UFO experiences. Who do you think is making these threats?
I was told that it was government agents. It was people from the government that came down, and through the company, also with the company, backed up those threats. So it was a sort of multilateral.
Through the company, because I contacted them on this, and they did not want to speak about it. And I contacted a reporter that had done an initial paper, printed report upon it, and he doesn't want to speak about it. And so I was just obviously being the, occult investigator that I am, I want to get to the bottom of this situation. Yeah. And in seeing that, this blackout that has occurred has only made my interest in it more and more real. They did run an article, and then it was quickly shuffled away in the paper. And I even believe that some of the actual news agencies like Channel 5 and so on had ran a television event on it. Yeah. But they
ran news stories. But, the news stories at some point turned from, I know there were some radio stations that talked about it. The news stories or the media stories very quickly turned to sort of this mocking kind of attitude.
That's what I received when I had checked in on things. They had said it was a weather balloon that some of the people were drinking on the tarmac. Were people drunk on the tarmac?
I can guarantee you there is no drinking on the tarmac. I can absolutely guarantee you that. And as
why was the reporter said there was Budweiser being drank on the tarmac? Why would
that I cannot tell you. The other thing, what I can tell you is that there again we're talking about 3 different unions, 3 different work groups, people who normally do not get along with each other, and I can guarantee you that if a mechanic said he saw a UFO, the ramp guys would be making fun of him. If they didn't really believe that it had happened. Same thing for a pilot.
Well, you could lose your job because, going back to a psychoanalysis, really because, I saw a UFO, okay, he's crazy. Yeah.
But all 3 of these people, more than 3 people, I believe there was, and a supervisor saw this as well. But all of these people, and I think there was about a dozen total, all of these people from all of these different work groups, including a management work group now for the supervisor, they all had the same story until they were told not to tell the story any longer. And again, I come to this from a point of I've seen aircraft at every distance and every weather and every light at every time of day, and can pretty safely say that at least the vast majority of UFO sightings have to do with people who just misinterpret what they're seeing.
Hence the unidentified flying object.
Exactly. And there have been other UFO sightings out at the airfield, but usually they're just sort of forgotten or laughed off. None of them garnered this kind of attention from both the government and the airline to stop.
Yes, it was
any
very
discussion.
Serious. Yeah, it was very serious. The media blackout and the mockery that came later, and then I believe that one person was even fired, is really fascinating to me because these are professionals. You guys are working in a very intensive environment, very dangerous. Yeah. It's not like you're going to just look over, see a flying disc, and just rule it out or just say whatever. Yeah. It's not a helicopter. We've identified it's not a drone or military. Mm-hmm. I mean, from the perspective of our timing anyway, whether it was, we don't know. I mean, you had never seen it. You had been out there 10 years. You had never seen anything fly out of there.
And I do have, I also have some training in astronomy. My first major in college was astronomy. So it was, and I took thousands and thousands of pictures out at the airport, over the years. The other thing is it was working there in the middle of the night or early in the morning. It's a phenomenal place to observe observe the stars, and I've seen comets out there and all kinds of amazing sights. So I know what I'm looking at.
In talking about your underground passageways, there was this rumor, and it's still going around. I mean, obviously, bunkers were built in the 50s during the time frames of our Cold War. Uh-huh. Are there bunkers throughout the O'Hare Field?
I don't know of any bunkers, but I know that reaching all the way from that site on the other side of the field where the military was. And where they still have passages that are just for the military, but all through the airport there are passages. I've walked many of those passages myself, just exploring.
So you got into them. Are they lit?
They're dimly lit, but a lot of them. A lot of those passages are also the passages in which it carries the sewer water, the hot water, cold water. Gas and all kinds of things.
Conduits.
All the conduits all throughout the airport. And then some of them are used for their bunkers back there, for lack of a better word, that are used for storage. And then there's others that are just sealed off with ominous little signs that say forbidden, no admittance without, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of those, at least, and this is prior to 9/11 or just shortly after 9/11, with my airport badge, I was able to get around.
These ominous signs, did they have a skull and crossbones on them?
No.
It was just saying warning,
just a red and white sign.
Nothing beyond this
just
point.
A white sign with red lettering.
Have you ever seen an aircraft that kind of was maybe brought up out of the ground at all?
At O'Hare, no.
So they don't have anything that would be underground as far as storage?
Not that I know of. And it's.
These are just some email questions that are coming in.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to clarify some things that are matching up pretty well. Mm-hmm. Now, why do you think these people were so threatened? It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, this is what happens whenever there's an incident of any kind, an accident, what have you, at the airport. You have there are levels because these guys, all these guys were union. They would have had to have had a union steward with them. Now, when they spoke with federal agents, they were not allowed to have union representative with them. So that was one thing. That was one thing that I was told. The other thing is you have to write a statement. You have to write these legal statements about exactly what you observed. So all of those statements would have had to have been done, and would at some point be in some record somewhere, whether or not they're being held or kept away. But they do go through these exhaustive investigations. I've been through them a number of times.
Sounds intensive. So what you're saying is that how many individuals did we have involved in the sighting?
I'm going to say it was about a dozen. I know it was a flight crew, a
12
supervisor.
people.
There's usually working for the ramp, working a flight. There's usually 3 to 4, sometimes more. You can have as many as 7 or 8, depending on people who are bringing things to the aircraft and taking things away. There's at least one mechanic, sometimes 2. This is a wide body gate, which means it's a large aircraft like a 777 or a 747.
And how big are those?
Those are the largest airplanes.
I mean, would you say they're 100 feet across? 50 feet across? No.
From wingtip to wingtip,
yes.
I think I'm going to say 120, 140 maybe. I'd have to double check that. I'm not sure, but they're the largest.
Was there a plane in the dock in the gate 719?
There was. Yeah, they were working a flight.
And do you know what that flight was?
No. I might have written it down somewhere at home, but I couldn't.
Were there passengers that were disembarking from that flight?
If there were, they wouldn't have seen anything. So
right, of course not.
They're disembarking straight from the aircraft.
Everyone just wants to get out of the plane.
Closed jet bridge.
Right.
So there would be no opportunity. Even if somebody was standing inside the terminal at the window, it might be, if something was higher than, say, 5 or 6 or 700 feet, the likelihood that they would see it would be remote.
So it would be the people near the end of the aircraft, near the back wing, that probably saw something first? Or would it be people on the right or left? No, the passengers were...
The passengers wouldn't see anything.
Yeah, they wouldn't see anything, so I'm eliminating them.
Out of it, yeah.
But the people around the aircraft, which side would you say it was, the right or the left?
They're going to be working the right side of the aircraft.
So and where they were the ones that saw it?
Probably, yeah. Now the mechanic and the flight crew would be circling the aircraft, or the mechanic might be at the front of the aircraft, but he has to do a walk around to inspect the integrity of the aircraft. You might also have somebody servicing the toilets. You might also have the food, the people bringing the food service to the airplane.
All of this happens at once.
All of this happens, yeah. And in the span, they like to turn aircraft. In wide body aircraft, I think the spec for United is something like 70 minutes. Might be a little bit less, which means the moment it gets into the gate, it gets unloaded, it gets reloaded and serviced, and out the gate is supposed to be about that 70, 78.
So planes don't sit on the ground long. Now, what does the mechanic exactly do? His observation is just strictly kind of examining for anything failed, or
he's looking for stress points on the aircraft. Sometimes you'll see an aircraft. I've seen aircraft come in where the fuselage is beginning to stress. That's because they expand and contract constantly. So you may have a point where the metal begins to weaken on the skin of the aircraft. At that point, the aircraft needs to be taken out of service, and then that entire section of the aircraft.
So when you saw this, did you notify the mechanic?
I've seen it, and I brought it to the attention of mechanics or flight crews, and oh yeah. So
are they the first ones that go around the craft?
Generally, the first people to the aircraft are the ramp people. So they're pulling up. Because you got to get the luggage. You got to get the luggage. You got to get the cargo out, what have you. So the mechanic generally is pulling up the push tractor and then hooking that up, and then he's starting to look at items that have come across that might have been deferred, that need to be repaired, a broken light, a service light, what have you, just little things that he needs to go around and check. There's a multitude of points that he needs to circle that aircraft, walk around that aircraft, and physically check.
These people,
tire pressure.
The reason why I'm asking this as well is because these are observationist people. These are people that are paying attention to detail. These aren't people that are just kind of going along, texting while they're driving, flowing through stops. These people are really paying attention.
They are. All of these work groups are very focused on what they're doing.
Yes, because of obvious danger. So they're not drunk. They're paying attention to detail, and there's lives on the line.
Yeah.
And they're doing this probably in a 70-minute interval. Obviously, the bag people are going to be out there in 15 minutes.
You could not do that job drunk. You couldn't.
Have you heard the drunk rumors?
Around this incident?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
Reporter, did you?
And that would be something here. And here's where the lie comes out of that. First of all, for that to be released, because these are union jobs, so there's a confidentiality agreement that exists between the company and the union in that investigation. So in order for that to come out, that would be a breach of contract. One. Two, no one I knew from that, and I've talked with a few friends out there. I still talk with people regularly out at the field. None of those people have been fired, and you wouldn't even be able to talk about that. That wouldn't be released. What would be released is what would happen is if someone said they were drinking, what the union and company would do would agree to one of two things: that if it was at such a point that this person needed to be terminated, they would be terminated, and then that file remains confidential, both for the employee's sake and the company's sake. That does not get released.
If someone,
especially if there's an accident and it goes to the NTSB or it goes to the
these are high government things, correct?
Then that may eventually come out, often many years later. But for an observational incident, you would not hear that. That would never be released.
So the rumors.
And that employee might also.
So there's rumors that are saying there was someone's birthday and that there was drinking going on. It would pretty much be a lie.
It would be absolutely a lie. First of all, nobody's going to be drinking anyways. Openly, there's no opportunity to. You have to swipe in, swipe out everywhere you go. And I can tell you the job, because we were understaffed. We were grossly understaffed after 9/11, after the bankruptcy happened in 2002, or the end of 2001, into 2002. We were so grossly understaffed that the people were barely getting lunches.
So that's horrible. So there was understaffing going on.
Yeah. And it's
There's
a half
no
hour
drinking.
lunch, by the way.
It's no one's birthday. This disc comes and hovers around or near this area at C-19 gate.
Yeah.
Did it make sound?
That I don't know. I can only go on based on the news reports that there was no.
And you're saying that it would be on radar. I mean, typically the radar tower's right there.
It should be on radar.
Would they have seen it from the tower?
They would have had to have seen it from the tower.
Did you ever hear anything
the
about
the tower being below the cloud bank, and the object, according to all the witnesses, was below the cloud bank.
And so the tower would have absolutely seen it. Did you speak with anyone that was working in the radar room that day?
I did not. No.
They generally are completely disconnected, and they're federal FAA people too, right?
No, they're not. They're union people.
So they are. Then what is their role exactly? I mean, as far as
they make sure that airplanes land and take off
correct on the
correctly.
Parallels.
And like I said, it's 120 optimal per hour landings and takeoffs. So they're busy all the time. But not only that, they're getting all the traffic that's coming into the airport and routing it to the correct runways. They're routing it. They also have Milwaukee airspace to contend with. They have Rockford. They've got small airplanes out of Romeoville and Bolingbrook. And,
so they're watching and observing all of these other airports. They're actually piggybacking on.
Yes.
So if someone's in the tower, and let's say a helicopter comes down at C-19, what would occur? I mean, it's not supposed to be there, let's say.
First of all, there's an airplane sitting at C-19. There's no those planes are wingtip to wingtip, so there would be no place to land anything. So anything being, first of all, there has to be any flyover of O'Hare Airport for any reason, and even just a we're just flying over to check the integrity of the airport, make sure birds haven't pooped on the roof too much.
Whatever. Yeah.
There is a physical record of that. They have to file a flight plan, and then everyone knows it, and that's public record. So if there was something like that there would absolutely be a public record of it.
Is there any way to land a helicopter near there?
No.
Because there's also the other disinformation, aside
100%
from
no.
Aside from the drinking at the gate, and aside from it being someone's birthday, which I already have discounted, I found ridiculous as answers,
it's absolutely not true.
That it was a helicopter of some kind dropping off someone. And if helicopters cannot go into that airspace, it's forbidden airspace.
Yeah.
And
it never landed.
It never landed.
The object never landed. The object hovered above the gate for a period of time and then disappeared through the
circular object.
Circular object.
Do you have any other descriptions of what it looked like?
No. And like I said, I went back to talk with people that I had known for a very, very long time.
And worked in that intense environment.
They were scared out of their mind and would not talk to me.
Well, with that, we will take a break. I'm Winter Lake at winterlake.com, streaming QUE4.org, and we will get to the bottom of this O'Hare UFO incident. I'm Winter Lake. Wanted to get back to this story at winterlake.com, streaming QUE4.org. And we have been discussing a UFO O'Hare incident that occurred by very reliable sources. And I'm getting to the bottom of the incident as to how it occurred, what occurred. And from what I'm to learn is that a disc came down, hovered into a low-altitude environment above gate C-19 at the O'Hare Field in Chicago, Illinois. Now, I had touched on the Brock Inspector incident being with the flight that had crashed years earlier that people have seen. We've eliminated that as an aspect of it, being a repeating of this plane that comes down, crashes, and that they see on radar from time to time. I did try to speak with one of the tower attendants that were there at that day of the incident of the UFO, and he would not do so. Also, I've been doing my research as far as following up news reports of the time of this occurrence, and a lot of it has been disinformation or discounted, according to the reporters that have been told it ended up being either an air balloon, a helicopter, and that the flight crew during that day were drunk. I find all of that to be kind of standard disinformation theory that does occur around UFO sightings. And indeed, in looking at it, I am an ardent skeptic as well. But although I do believe in UFOs, and I've had my own kind of issues with UFOs that we will touch on later episodes of the Pentacle-Hours. But the sighting of this particular UFO has been by very reliable sources. These are people that are under psychological examination. They fly very large aircraft, and there are many lives being transported, and lives and dollars that are on the line. So let's return to some of your history at the field. You're not just like a regular worker that was there 90 days, I don't think. No. And
I should say, so people know who they're talking about, and because I'm absolutely not afraid of whatever powers that be out there. W.C. Turk from the station here, but I've got better than 15 years experience in working for the airlines, both on the field and doing logistics. So I've been in investigations. I've seen a great deal. I've helped train people out at the airport. There's pretty much not a job I haven't done out on the field at the airport. You're not going to BS me about what happens on the field.
Right, because if someone says, hey, I saw a UFO, you would discount it as saying, it could be any angle of another aircraft or whatever, and the different things that you had seen.
Absolutely.
Do you believe there was a UFO there that day?
Yes.
And you think it was something extraterrestrial, or was it government?
That I can't say. I wouldn't even speculate on that. But
the object that you said, it was not anything that you had seen at O'Hare before.
No, again, I didn't see it. So, but the people that I worked with and knew for years and years were intimidated to such a degree in this that they clammed up. They would not speak even to me. They wouldn't speak about it at all. They literally said, "I can't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Well, I'll never talk about it. That's it." Something had put the fear of God into these people.
Yes.
People that would drop their gloves and get into a fist fight at the drop of a hat had been so intimidated by something. So and what that does, what that indicates is that somebody in the government was so animated by this event that they felt the need to threaten people with their livelihoods or with their security in order to keep the event from becoming any more public than it already had been. The other thing that they did was it was necessary for them to create an environment of disinformation in order to discredit people who I know as being very good people.
Correct, like the drinking, that it was a helicopter, that there was someone's birthday.
Yeah.
The object that was described, the circular floating object, probably either near cloud level or something.
Just below cloud level.
Wouldn't other flights or aircraft maybe possibly see it as well? Or would they be just like you just sneaks up on you? Like
They could have, and I have no indication that other people didn't see it and were also talked to and dissuaded from giving out any further information or any further statements on it.
Absolutely. So. Have you ever seen any kind of disc object floating around over at near O'Hare at all? Ever?
Personally, no.
See, that's what's so interesting. Other people have said that there have been around over near that area, and it's almost becoming commonplace. Do you think that some of that is due to disinformation as well? That all of it from this incident, that they're now exacerbating it?
I don't know, and there was a what I believe to be a Photoshop picture of a UFO over the United Terminal years ago.
Right.
But I think what makes this particular incident stand out, and like I said, I'm very skeptical about what most people perceive as UFOs. But what makes this one stand out was the level of intimidation, and I know a couple of FBI agents out at the airport. The people that interviewed these people who I still call friends were not FBI.
Do you think that the incident was quieted down so much because it was some kind of project, maybe an experiment on the government, or was it something they just were hiding? Wasn't anything.
I honestly wouldn't even speculate.
So you wouldn't. Yeah. So you, in all your years out there, you haven't seen any kind of training or experimental practice with aircraft or drones.
No, and the environment out there is so intense and so busy that there isn't really there really isn't the opportunity, at least that I know of, for that kind of activity. You would very quickly run into some really stark and dangerous.
So they're not doing any kind of like
issues.
new aerial construction. They're not doing any practice runs. There's not helicopters in the forbidden zone of this aircraft area.
Not that I've ever seen.
And you've never seen any kind of disc like this around there, so they're not flying in and out.
Right.
My speculation is, from some of my presumptions that I have looked at it, I'm going to speak from my angle. This aircraft, or whatever it was sighted also at another location at the naval base north of Chicago. Also, there is some kind of nuclear old facility that no one really knows about, but it's still semi-operational as nuclear never goes down, which is near also the naval area. This sighting occurred in or around where the nuclear area is, probably what is known as North Shore. Then, from what I'm to understand, it was under or low beneath the radar gain, which means that it wasn't on radar, but it was evasive. So the sightings that had occurred in or around the naval base, it had moved and had gotten through what is known as the O'Hare corridor on a parallel. When you run a parallel or shadow an aircraft, you can almost, if you get close enough to it, you can disguise yourself. Now, for example, in a pilot's term, and I am a pilot, what you could do is if you get in close circumference with another aircraft, you can turn off what is known as an encoder. And you could marry into the parallel line of another aircraft and almost mirror it and become one. This is what I'm kind of thinking that the machine or device had done. That's the only rational thinking, is that it had moved away from the northern field of where not the naval base is, and it had come down parallel with another aircraft being evasive. And I think the only logical scenario is that it was still hiding at the airport itself, not to be under radar, not to be identified, and it managed to get out of the loop. And it's so speculative, but
I'm going to say
they would have scrambled fighter jets or something if there was something there.
I'm gonna say that scenario is a little bit difficult too, because the distance between from nose to tail between incoming aircraft on a day when if they're flying VFR, visual flight rules,
you would have seen it.
They would have the next pilot would have seen it, and with 1,000 or 1,500 foot ceiling, if depending on the wind. If the pilots were coming in low enough, you would have that other pilot coming through, the chasing pilot basically coming through, a mile behind the other flight, mile and a half behind the other flight. They would have seen something on the tail of that other aircraft. The witnesses that I had heard from said that this had lowered through the cloud bank and then raised back up through the cloud bank.
Did they see any aircraft come in after? Mysterious types of aircraft come in after?
Not that I know of.
Do you know
and
how?
I didn't hear any reports.
Do you know how quickly they were interviewed from that? Did it happen pretty much instantaneously from the event?
Yeah, I believe most of them got the story out or started getting the story out pretty quickly, and then within the next day or 2 days, they were shut down.
And I mean, how quick did the media go? I mean, the media was called, or someone said they saw something. How did they even find out, I wonder?
Somebody had contacted the media, so but that's when it became an issue right away, and then it was shortly after that whoever got to all of these people managed to. Because
in contacting the media, it almost made it out like it's a joke, like it's some entertainment to put on.
And that's very much the way the media treated it.
Because in talking with them, they have a totally different scenario as days. And the same.
I mean, it is a significant security issue, regardless of what it was. it's a significant security issue. It's a significant safety issue.
That's where I'm going as well, because, I mean, in these other sightings that mirrored it, maybe my analogy isn't perfect and it's just my supposition of how it arrived there or what was going on, because, within hours there were other sightings of it being up there, and then it was down to O'Hare, and there was something going on that day. Now, in what's going on, also what doesn't make sense is that why wouldn't something be scrambled if there was these sightings going on during that day? But it was, we were in a post 9/11 reality, so it would have been, it would have been very serious time.
Yep.
It would have been serious time. You can't get a helicopter to land there. It's not going to be some Wayfair jet just trying to get in somewhere. No. And I've never, in my knowledge, knowing of a floating device or some kind of craft.
Right, and like I said, when I was in high school, I was in the Civil Air Patrol. So I've kind of and around 191, one of the investigators of that, actually, I wrote a term paper based on a report that had not yet come out by the FAA, but with details about the flight of 191. So so it's sort of been my whole life, and then going to when I was at war, I was used to seeing military aircraft of all different types, combat aircraft in combat situations, and then being out at the airport, and then being in management and logistics for the airline for so many years, flying all over the world in all different kinds of airplanes around the planet. This was nothing. This was nothing like any aircraft would behave.
And it's nothing like you'd seen.
Yeah.
It's not like you're just going to see a circular object land and just act in the way it did. I mean, it doesn't have the rotation or the performance of a regular aircraft. If it's floating or if it goes up and down, regular aircraft doesn't do that. If you have very reputable people that are seeing it, it's hard to discount them. These are people that are in it every day. They do it in and out. It is their job.
And I might have discounted it too, but I knew these people.
So what you're saying is, if you didn't know them, you would even be kind of.
I would be. Well, maybe they.
You'd be like, oh, they were drunk, and
maybe they didn't know. Well, I wouldn't be like that only because of my experience in the airlines, but I would be like, well, maybe they didn't understand what they're, or maybe I would just dismiss it. But because of the level of intimidation on these people, that's what really created the biggest question in my mind. And it's not that I believe, they knew aliens were coming, so that's why they had to stop this, or there was some sort of secret government project that they needed to keep hush hush. But it was the level of intimidation.
Turk, I agree, because I'm going to tell you, I've been doing my own discovery. I cannot get anyone from the tower that was in the tower that day to talk to me. I cannot get the news reporter that was on the scene who had interviewed people to talk to me without telling me, they were drunk or some other thing. I cannot get other workers or even really get a hold of them to get a good discussion. However, one is on the fence who may discuss with me some things, and we may bring him in later, and he'll decide what he wants to do.
Tell him I'll talk with him.
Yeah, it's been very
I probably know him.
Interesting. In trying to get more discovery to get to this bottom of this O'Hare incident.
Tell him we'll change his voice.
Yeah, we could change his voice, and I'm sure he's listening right now, and we will go as we go, because I'm looking to figure out what exactly the color of the thing was, because that would help me a lot too, because I'm kind of close to this.
Now it's sort of about the reputation of those people as well.
Well, they've been just. I mean, if they want to know what their reputation is,
and it's about the reputation of that job. I've done that.
They're
job.
Nameless and faceless, Turk. Yeah. They're just nameless and faceless, and they've been labeled as drunks on a birthday party.
I know.
And I have no idea, because it doesn't rationally make sense to me, because how are you going to have a pilot who just came in who has no connection? As you said, there's divisions between your mechanics union, your pilots union, and your guys that are on the ground. So these three divisions are marrying.
And a supervisor.
And so, I don't see how it's possible that you're going to have a pilot who has
He's
given
not
a
going to be drinking.
statement.
I guarantee you, he's not going to be drinking Budweiser with the ramp guys or the mechanic for somebody's birthday.
No, because
Not
he's going to be.
happen.
He's got his own ego thing going, so that and to discount all these different parties, possibly through freedom of information. I could get statements, but I think that this has actually been cordoned off into a private union business. United Airlines matter. Yeah. This has been this whole issue of this UFO incident has not been able to be discovered as a. And this is very rare, because I have done discovery. That is the nature of Pentacle-Hours. I am looking to find answers to the unknown and unexplained.
You should be able to find out. You should be able to find out if there was by asking the union. And I know some really good people out at the union for the ramp workers who would at the very least be able to tell you whether drinking was an aspect of this without having to get into details on specific personnel, but they would be able to say yes or no. Drinking was not a factor in any of this.
Yeah, I don't believe the drinking thing. Yeah. I do not believe that the pilot is going to have any knowledge of that. But what I'm saying is that I can't get my hands on any of the documents, the statements that were given that you have described. I know exactly what you're talking about because I've been researching it. They have labeled this as some kind of union, United Airlines business thing, and yet that has
and they
this
will to
thing,
a degree for the reputation of the people that were part of that investigation. So so they're not going to give you information. United can't. There are laws. There are laws dealing with dealing with employment. Human resources that they can't divulge. There are contract laws, but then there's also the union protection of the reputation of its members. So you start running into that. So, but without asking, was so and so drinking? You can ask if alcohol was ever a part of this without identifying.
The whole thing,
yeah,
with the UFO.
and then you're not superseding any,
But I can't get the information through the declassification memos, and there were government entities involved with this. The entities being either some kind of Central Intelligence Agency people that do have some office there, I believe. Do they have an office at the location or
the
nearby?
CIA?
Yes. Yes, they do. What kind of business are they conducting there?
I couldn't tell you, but I know during the early part.
I mean, you spent a decade at the airport.
At the early
the
part
word
of
is going to go around.
Some of the rendition flights went through O'Hare. So there were a number of things going on there that they were always, aside from the fact that really basically every federal airport is as close as you can get to being a military institution. There's so much going on.
Yeah,
there.
because there's
so many people going through there.
Yeah,
you've got the international terminal where people are moving in and out of the country. From 150 different nations around the planet constantly. So there very definitely is a strong federal presence.
Military and federal, not so much military is what you're saying. You're saying that
there's some military personnel out there, but
really it's more, Central Intelligence.
There's more
agency.
of an intelligence personnel, and it runs the gamut from Department of Homeland Security through the CIA, through the DOA, all of ICE, all these sort of functions that are working. The FBI is out there. The FBI has an office out there. So there's an awful lot going on federally at the airport that most people don't think of. And some of it has to do with security and terrorism. Some of it has to do with a lot of different
things. The object near Seagate 19.
Yep.
What is under that area? What is around there, would you say?
It's a bag directly below that.
Yes.
Between below about 2 feet of concrete is a baggage sorter system. So really,
there's no conveyors down over there. There's no kind of underground passages during that area?
Oh, there is, but it's a general area that's used for the storage of bags.
So there is no like sorties. There's no things that come up out of the ground.
No,
there's nothing there.
No.
So the object was there, and it was in an area that would really be kind of off in the way. Is that in a flight pattern? Would that be in a flight pattern?
No, it would not be.
So
but that would be the flight pattern if you were flying. If you were a helicopter, whether a traffic helicopter or a DOA helicopter or what have you, if you were flying across the airfield, that's the primary route.
See, that's where the confusion is coming in.
Yeah.
So that area is cordoned for helicopter transfer.
But they never stop. They have to cross. They have to file a flight plan.
They never land.
And they never land. There's no place to land. So that's that area is leased to United Airlines. There's no place to land. There's absolutely no place to land a helicopter safely anywhere near there.
This unidentified flying object, I mean, in the circumference of that particular area, where it knows that jets aren't going to be in a flight path. This goes right along with the helicopter hypothesis as how they could call it disinformation. And why it was over there, it could very well conceal itself, or it would be another blimp as just a helicopter itself. It kind of, it goes along with what I was saying about the encoding.
There is no, and for people that work around airplanes and have worked around aircraft for years and years, there is absolutely no mistaking a helicopter for something that's not.
A circular object that hovered probably about 500 yards off the ground.
There's no mistaking that. You're not gonna screw that up.
Right, and
especially when you have time to when it's static and remains stationary above you for a period of time. You're not going to make that mistake. You just don't.
And the helicopters but it's in that area where the helicopters pass. They don't land, but it knew. Whatever the object was, this goes back to what I was saying. It knows where to hide. It was it was disguising itself because it was low and it was being evasive, and it's curious as to that kind of behavior. Well, Bill, we will revisit this. We will have to do some more research and discover more about the O'Hare UFO incident in time, and I will get to the bottom of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
A file.
I'm Winter Lake at winterlake.com. Streams QUE4.org. Quite an interesting show we're having. We've been discussing the O'Hare UFO incident that occurred some years ago. I've been trying to get to the bottom of it, and in doing more research and trying to get answers, I've found it to be very hard. It's odd that it would be such a classified situation now, considering that it happened so long ago, and that I don't really see the relevance to it unless clearly something is going on. 9 out of 10 of these types of incidents, I myself discount as fraud or, person seeing something that they want to see, some kind of angle from an actual aircraft that is, tinted a certain direction or, obtuse to the sun and giving off some kind of reflection which makes it look like a UFO when really it's just a jet. But that's not what's been going on here. In looking at it, these people were sober. They had vast experience in flight plans, patterns, and had been around aircraft for decades. It's not something they're just going to invent. They're not just going to come to work one day and say, let's all collaborate together that today we're going to admit that we saw a UFO. Being that you have the mechanics union people, that you have the people on the ground that are doing flight support, and then you have the pilot himself of the actual airplane. So this is kind of an odd, very real incident, in my opinion, that has gone on with other odd, very real incidents that have occurred in and around O'Hare Field, and having such a cover-up of it with the threats and the different ill-fated portends that have been issued against people make it even more real. And the fact that some of the people that were interviewed by the government that come in were told to be quiet about it. Why would they have to? You know, if you're just drunk out on the tarmac hanging out with your friends and you're just making stuff up, why would you need to be silenced? And that is one thing that has been corroborated with this particular incident. I received a few emails about this particular O'Hare UFO incident, and I'll answer them later. Probably won't be able to go into them too much now. I'm going to be doing some more research. I'm going to try to speak with the actual reporter who was there from one of the television stations to see if he'll speak with me. He didn't initially want to. Possibly I could sway him and do some other research on it. The Axe Murder House people that are out in, I don't know exactly where they're located. I think they're in Iowa or something on this excursion of ghost hunting, have not been able to phone in, probably being swamped over there by all of the different ghosts or their own activities. I don't know if it's the ghost boxes or whatever they're doing, but I do not think we're going to be able to hear from them today, as we are getting late into the hour of the Pentacle-Hours, which is unfortunate, and I can see that some of you are disappointed, but we will definitely have to get the ghost hunter team in here, or at least one of their representatives, to come and talk to us about the Axe murder incident and what they uncovered as far as their ghostly excursion into the unknown. So I do apologize about that not happening live today from 5 to 7 here in Chicagoland. It's pretty sedate around the studio today. Not a lot of people are here. It's kind of mellow. It's just me and my different people that I had interviewed, and they're now shuffling out. It's kind of a warmer night than it's been. I don't know what Freya's night is going to bring. Possibly some more things in my own reality that are kind of different. Definitely been having some odd phenomena and synchronicity going on. I don't know why, but like I keep seeing the same people on the train, and no, it has nothing to do with timing. I'll be on the train going down a certain way and keep seeing the same people, but different times. And that to me is kind of odd, because you have this vast city and it's so random and unexpected that you would think that you would not see the same people. I don't want to say that I'm being watched, because that would be paranoia, wouldn't it? To say that, oh, wow, you know, I'm seeing the same dude in this jacket, you know, and he's getting off a stop earlier than me every time, or, you know, even though I'll do random and I'll still see different things. It's not Born Identity or Born Legacy or some crazy stuff. I'm not a Black Ops operative, or I'm not saying that I can spot them, but it's just been very different, that's for sure. In September 1825, a similar visitation to the one that I've been describing today occurred. An extensive forest fire in New Brunswick had created a widespread alarm, hardly quieted by later knowledge of atmospheric conditions and under the stratum of fog and upper stratum of smoke. There were plainly seen in sight a circular object. It had been able to hover for long periods of time. It appears at the same simultaneous area of this fire the phenomenon was visible. People were quite ill as seeing something that they believed as the Day of Judgment from the fire, and then seeing a circular object. Once again, almost identical conditions, the same phenomena wrought exactly the same chaos in the minds of a very large number of people in New England and New York during that same day. And then later, in September 6th of 1881, there was a brooding darkness and some kind of object that came down. There was a fire and some kind of spectral blue flame. From the area around where this hovering craft was, blue flowers were changed to crimson hues. And by the afternoon, there was odd lights of red and white, and it was a mess in the land. And that is taken from old articles in regards to unidentified flying objects that predate us by more than 100 years, with very similar clarity as the one that I have just described today that occurred at O'Hare Field some years ago. The mystery that is surrounding it is being very hard to unravel, as there has been a cloak of silence and disinformation thrown over these different men and women that were a part of the different groups, flight crews, and other people that were there that day at the O'Hare Field. But having this, not really revelation, or having these other sightings that show or is very similar as a obelisk or a disc, like, not obelisk, but a disc-like craft hovering, causing fire in these other incidents, according to these old articles, and then lifting up in a one-dimensional way up into the atmosphere, with the conditions being the same, being fog or strata or low ceiling, as our guest had described. And low ceiling meaning that as the object went up, it would pierce into it and make it an indention, that there would be a created thing. Helicopters do it too, but with their fans, utilizing fans, as I guess we are primitive, just barbarians with our technology compared to something that's being described here, or even primitive to what occurred 100 years ago. These different articles were given by pilgrim of some type. These were God-fearing people that were on some kind of retreat. And God-fearing is, in my opinion, is arbitrary or whatever that is. I mean, they lie and deceive too. I'm not saying that they don't. But anyway, take it with a grain of salt that they had gone out of their way and contacted the press, and an article was given. And to being pushed to do so, or had, desire to do so, aren't typically people that are driven to mania. They're not driven to make up stories. To be the wolf is lying all the time and deceiving, or whatever that is. Even the pilgrims in this different New England community were not really, in my opinion, interested in causing some kind of upheaval. So they wouldn't go and approach a reporter and just make up a story from September 1825 out of nothing. And it's very similar to what I'm describing at the O'Hare Field incident with the UFO. The people that were there were not drunk. They were servicing an aircraft. There was some unidentified flying circular object that came down, hovered over an odd area where it would only have to know that it could conceal itself from radar positioning. It was in what is known as like a parallel for helicopters only, that helicopters can pass through, but they never land. That is very interesting to me, and that fits into many different scenarios that occur with UFOs, that they do encode and hide themselves in radar patterns so they are not seen. And I do think that whatever this thing was, as being described in prehistory, was being very evasive. Because how it was that even in this fielded area where these trees had caused a forest fire and so on, it was clearly hiding even then from whatever civilization was around in 1825. And then a later incident in 1881. And it's odd because both of these issues happened in September on the same day, September 6th. But I'm not saying that the O'Hare Field incident happened on that day. I'm saying that in those two incidents that it happened in a similar area, causing similar events of fire and stuff like that, from the craft itself probably taking off or landing or having difficulty, and we could speculate all day long on what that would be. But in Pentacle-Hours, we do explore a lot of different unknowns. And on Monday, I'm going to have Brittany Vipond hopefully phone in. She is an avant-garde model who does a lot of ghost and magical experimentation. She is also a very good friend of mine, and she's appeared on many of the covers of my books, and has a great personality and a very wandering soul. So I hope you tune in then. And it is Freya's Day, and tomorrow is Saturn Day. So I hope everyone is going to be all right.